You're listening to the Hella Well with Danielle show, a podcast taking women of color on a journey exploring all things wellness and travel related. We're all about showing you how to put on your oxygen mask first and creating lasting self-care habits that will free you to travel the world and live the life you truly desire, and not one you have to fake loving. I'm your host, Danielle Washington. Now let's buckle up and start this journey. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Hello Well with Danielle podcast. I am your host, Danielle Washington, and this is our anniversary episode. I can't believe it's been a freaking full year. And so I felt like, what do I want to talk about for the anniversary topic? Like, what is the most important thing that I would love for you guys to work on and for me to work on, and what's been the most important thing for me in my life and in how I got to where I am today. And I thought about it and I'm like, duh, it's our relationship with self. Our relationship with self is the most important relationship. And if you aren't able to understand the difference between self-love and self-care, it makes it really hard that you're likely to experience or benefit from self-love or self-care. So I wanted to really talk about the difference between the two, because I hear all the time people think that it's the same. And I actually had someone ask me recently, like, is there a difference between self-love and self-care? Because they're like, I don't see a difference. And I'm like, there definitely is a difference. And it's been such a huge part of just my life, and the fact that not knowing the difference between self-love, self-care, and self-work, which is a whole other thing, I had to learn it the hard way. And there was a lot of bumps in the road because I wasn't able to learn the difference between the three of them. And so today, I was thought about working on talking about the difference between self-love, self-care, and self-work. But I'm like, sis, you're doing a lot. So I was like, okay, we'll just focus on this week, self-love and self-care. And so let's kind of go out with the basics. I think people mix it up so much because we're just hit with so much in this world. I think social media, don't get me wrong, I like social media. I love starting to become addicted to TikTok, which I never thought was a possibility. But, I scroll through Instagram, I scroll through Facebook, I scroll through Twitter. And so I see there is value in that. So I'm not saying there's not value in that, but we are so bombarded and we're hit all the time with so many messages about the right way, and I air quote the right way to have the right body, the right way to eat, the right way to, live healthily, the right way to even do wellness, or how we dress. The magazines are always telling us, 10 the right ways to do this, the right ways to do that. And it is exhausting. We're even told the right way to do self-care and self-love. So it's totally easy to lose sight of the fact that self-love and self-care are completely different, and they are not the freaking same. And so I wanted to really focus in on what's the difference. So let's start with self-love. Self-love, and I love a good dictionary definition. So I looked it up, self-love, in the Webster's Dictionary. And self-love in the Webster's Dictionary says, love of self, such as having a high regard for your own well-being and happiness, and an appreciation for one's own self-worth and virtue. I'm like, this is really lofty. I get it, but I don't get it. And then I hate when you have a definition. This is just a sidebar. I hate a definition that uses the word in the definition. So I'm like, it doesn't really clarify it. So yes, love of self, it makes sense, I guess, in a large degree. It means love yourself and to appreciate yourself. But let's go a little step further. And I want to go a little bit deeper. The way I see self-love is really the act of knowing and accepting oneself. Oh, and I say this from someone who didn't do that for so many years. I did not love myself I didn't have love for myself. I didn't even know what self-love was. I thought I did. And I was like, I've seen enough movies and, I think I get it, but I didn't get it. And I wanted it. I wanted self-love so bad. I wanted self-love probably as much as I wanted love from other people. But I think I take that back. In my mind, I thought I wanted self-love more than I wanted love from other people. But I think my love for validation from other people outweighed my self-love, which got in the way of my self-love, which is a whole other kind of weird, twisted situation that occurred. But I do think that self-love, if you really get to the root of it, it's really knowing and accepting yourself. It's about cultivating an attitude of, gratitude and acceptance, not just emotionally, but also physically. It's about, accepting what your body looks like. I look at my body at 40 something right now and I'm like, okay, my butt used to be a lot higher and my stomach used to be a lot flatter, but I'm at a point in my own self-love journey that I'm accepting my body exactly as it is. Yeah, I probably could get a personal trainer and maybe I'd get a butt lift, which I never will do. And I can do a lot of different things and I get stressed out about my body and feel like, oh my God, my body doesn't look like this model or this actress and I should try to, have, bigger boobs because, I hear guys like that and all these different things. Nah, sis, I love my body exactly as it is. It's not perfect, but the reality is I'm perfectly imperfect. And that is self-love to me, to recognize, that you're human and that you're perfectly imperfect. And I will never reach perfection. And I don't even think there is a perfect body out there. And it goes also, so that's the physical side of it, but even emotionally, I'm perfectly imperfect. There's days where I'm not okay. There's days where I'm judgmental. There's days when I am jealous and I'm envious of other situations. And I also have learned to give myself grace, which is a form of self-love. And through those moments of acceptance and gratitude, I'm able to love on myself in a way that I think has helped me become a better person. And the other aspect of it all, and I'm probably going to go a little woo-woo for some people, is I also think to love yourself is to experience yourself as love and to know that you are love. Not that you're just loved, loved, L-O-V-E-D, but that you are L-O-V-E, that you are love. You are the complete, utter energy of love. You are the essence of love. And if you are the embodiment of love and what it means to love, then you are worthy. You are perfectly perfect as you are because you are love. There is no need for external validation. There's no need to be a certain way or what I call the shoulds, and I should be this way, I should think this way, because you are just period love on just a fundamental level. And when we think of ourselves as just we are love, it shifts the mindset. It shifts the game of what we're in, where we are and how we think about things. So what are examples of love? So a couple examples of love, the way I like to think of what are examples of self-love? Self-love is taking care of yourself and, taking care of your own needs, not sacrificing yourself for, being there for others and people pleasing. And then, I did a whole episode on people pleasing, which is like the literally opposite of self-love. Another one is taking care of yourself and knowing that, let me rephrase that. Another one is knowing that you are worthy of being kind to yourself, and it's talking to yourself in a kind way. I always say, when you talk to yourself, because I always say I talk about the inner mean girl. When you talk to yourself as if you're talking to your 5-year-old daughter, that's self-love. When you're able to be kind to yourself in that way, when you're listening and trusting yourself, and being able to when you're able to trust yourself, when you're able to trust yourself because you know yourself and you are listening to yourself, that's something that it took a long time. I would say that started doing that in the last 2 or 3 years, and it has been so impactful into the way I show up every day in my own life. Another form of self-love, I think, is letting go of comparison. And, also thinking about it in this way, letting go of relationships that no longer serve you. I think that's so important in the way of self-love. And also just living from a place that you know that you're enough, period. And, it goes back to knowing that you are love. But I feel like we struggle so much with self-love. And I can say for myself, an experience of struggling from self-love because we're so disconnected from our inner truth and our inner being. If self-love is that inner truth and, being able to accept and be aware of that, when you're so disconnected because we're taught we need to be a certain way, you need to, have these social norms, like this is the way it's supposed to be. This is the way to do self-care. This is the way to eat healthy. This is the way to, exercise. And we discredit that inner truth, that inner knowing, the inner being. We're disconnected from the self-love, and it leads to lack of love and leads to all these other different things, and leads to people pleasing. And I think that it's so easy to struggle with it. And I think part of that reason, the reason why it's so difficult for self-love and why people have difficulty with self-love, is that there's all these misconceptions around it. And we're taught that self-love is selfish, which it's not. Self-love is like the complete opposite of being selfish. You can't pour from an empty cup. And we talk about it all the time. That's, I think the most truest or purest form of self-love is putting your oxygen mask on first. They tell you that on the plane for a freaking reason. You can't be there for others if you have no oxygen. If you are pouring out all of your energy into the world and leaving nothing for yourself, it is hella hard to be there for someone else. And so it's not egotistic to care about yourself and to love on yourself and to focus on yourself. It's the exact opposite. To focus on yourself not only helps you, but it also helps the other ones that you say that you love and that you are trying to help as well. Another misconception about self-love is that it's narcissistic and oh my God, you're being vain and you're being superficial because you're all about loving yourself. Nope. Again, the exact opposite. It goes beyond, self-love goes beyond the surface. And it isn't just all these rainbows and butterflies and unicorns all day long. Don't get it twisted. Self-love, is making hard choices. Self-love is definitely not always comfortable, but it can be, and it goes back into that self-work, which is completely different than self-love. But through the self-work, you're able to accept and love yourself, which can sometimes be difficult, but, and loving yourself and caring for yourself, and I'm getting ahead of myself, so I'm going to stop right there. As I'm going further into the conversation than I wanted to go. Okay, going back, reverse back. So self-love requires courage to distinguish your weaknesses and challenges you in different, and there's obstacles in self-love. And I want people to know that self-love isn't always rainbows and butterflies, but it sure the hell can be some of the best rainbows and butterflies you've ever had. The other misconception I see often is people think self-love is entitlement. And what does it mean to be entitled? To be entitled, people who believe that they're unconditionally owed something regardless of effort, merit, or context. And I feel like there's a confusion between self-love and being entitled, because I think people think they kind of tie it in or confuse self-love with worth. And recognizing your worth. Just because you recognize that you are worthy of love, just because you recognize that you are love, doesn't mean that you're entitled. It doesn't mean that there's no merit, that there's no context, that there's no effort. There's effort behind self-love. Self-love isn't just about what you do. It's not just about, I deserve to be, Beyonce. I deserve to be as wealthy and as successful and a celebrity like Beyonce. That's not what self-love is about. It isn't this elite or exclusive thing, but it's at the core of your humanity. That's why I say self-love is love. You are love. Self-love, knowing that you are self-love, knowing self-love is that knowing that you are love. And that is the core of all of our humanity. And it goes back to the fact that our relationship with ourselves impacts every aspect of our life. If you are not loving yourself, you're showing up differently than someone who is. When you show up as someone who has self-love for themselves, you show up differently than someone who is lacking it. And I can see the difference. Like when I was showing up from a place of being a victim versus a person who loved themselves, it was always about, let me show people how hard life is. You're like, oh my God, my mom is, it needs help. My dad had a stroke and, oh my God, COVID did this to my business. And, I dated this guy and he ended up being, this total jerk and and all these different things. That was me coming from a victim mentality and not knowing my worth, not knowing that I was worthy of who I chose to spend time with. It was coming from a place of not being grateful for my parents are still alive. Crazy, but still alive. And I can show acceptance for that. And it also comes from the fact that, setting those boundaries, which I think is actually self-care, but it also in self-love, it's knowing that I am worthy of what I desire in life. I am worthy and I am able to accept that I look the way I do and it's okay. I say and feel and the way I do because it's the way I am and it's okay. I love crystals and I love that I love crystals and I'm okay. It's part of my self-love is loving the fact that I love something that someone else may not love, and it's okay to be me. Unapologetically me. It is okay to unapologetically be you without guilt, without shame, and to love and accept, loving and accepting and trusting yourself. It's okay to trust yourself and your opinions as word, and not feeling like, oh, well, on Instagram, this person has 25K followers and she says self-love is this. So I guess, I'm doing it wrong because someone else told me it's differently. Nah, sis, it's not that way. It's about what works best for you. And so I'm getting on a tangent. So I'm just going to stop right there. So that's self-love. So now that we talked about what self-love is, let me break down what self-care is and what's the difference between the two. So self-care is the maintenance or act of taking care of your well-being, of your mind, body, and soul. It's what nourishes and refuels and refills you. Think about it like this. It's like that waiter who sees your wine glass is empty and comes by and just tops off your glass. Who doesn't love someone who tops off your glass? That's your self-care to your self-love. It can go from, basic things like getting rest, washing your hair can be self-care. It's taking care of your body. Because who wants some janky ass hair? It can be, eating healthy to creating healthy boundaries. We talked about that, setting healthy boundaries. It's self-care. And also like doing breath work is self-care. Doing meditation is self-care. Taking a bubble bath, self-care. That's one people think, like people kind of obviously think about, exercising is a form of self-care. But self-care also means healing relationships with the relationship with yourself. And I don't think people think about that. I think self-care is hugely about healing the relationship with your self-care, with yourself, so you can get to that self-love. It's about asking yourself and giving yourself what you need and fully embracing every part of yourself. It's asking for help. And, wait a second, it's asking for help and being able to receive it. Yo, that is like huge. And let me even throw in further. It's about asking for help, receiving the help, and doing it all without guilt or shame. It's about living intentionally. And, there's all these like self-love. There's misconceptions about what self-care is. Again, like self-love, people think self-care is selfish. But how is it selfish to recharge and restore yourself? When you're able to restore yourself and give yourself more energy by resting, by giving yourself and your body and your mind and your soul what it needs so it can recharge, how is that selfish? Is it selfish to recharge your freaking phone when it's about to die? So why is it selfish to recharge your body and your mind and your soul when it's about to die? I don't get it. So I don't understand the concept, the misconception, and the myth that self-care is selfish. It don't make sense to me. The other part of it is people say, oh man, self-care it takes up too much time. I ain't got time. I'm so busy. I'm doing all these different things. We choose what we spend our time on, what we value. Where we spend our time is where we value. And when you don't value yourself, that self-love, nah, sis, you ain't gonna do self-care, because self-care and self-love are completely different. But it's a choice, and it doesn't take a lot of time. Self-love could be something as quickly as, saying something positive about yourself. How long does it take to say something positive to yourself? Let me show you. I am worthy. I am love. How long did that take? That took seconds. That's a form of self-care. And it doesn't take long. So I call BS on the fact that people say self-care takes too much time. I also call BS on people saying, self-care is too expensive. How expensive is it, again, to talk nicely to yourself? How expensive is it to go to bed early? How expensive is it to set a boundary? Oh, wait, it costs not a single thing to go to bed early. It costs not a single thing to set healthy boundaries. So I also don't understand how people can say self-care is expensive. Now, what you choose self-care to be can be expensive, but it doesn't have to be expensive. If you choose self-care as, I'm going to go get this hella expensive massage and whatever, this facial cream and all these other things, yeah, then that's your choice. But it's a choice. But there are a lot more different things you can do for self-care that cost absolutely nothing. The other thing that I hear all the time is like people think, and I see it all along, and again, it's part of the reason why I even created this podcast, is self-care is one size fits all. And I say it all the time. Self-care and wellness is not one size fits all. What works for me, 100% most likely does not work for you. And it's like a pair of custom jeans. Self-care is not a one size fits all. And the last thing I always see as a misconception around self-care is that it must be earned. Well, I have to do all these things, like I need to sacrifice all these things for other people and show how much I care for people, going back to people pleasing. And then after I do all those amazing things for all those people and exhaust myself to where I'm almost dead and my battery is like literally on 1%, then I have earned the right for self-care. Nah, sis. You've earned the right for self-care because you exist. Because you are worthy. And you don't have to love yourself to do self-care. And that's one thing I wanted to talk about too. It's like self-care and self-love are not, they can intertwine, but they can be completely opposite. But when you know and understand yourself, self-care does become a lot easier, and it becomes like almost automatic, and it's like a no-brainer. But by taking care of yourself, you're able to also really show up for not just yourself, but for everyone else that you care and love around. And so I think it's important. But again, you don't have to have self-care to love yourself, and you don't have to love yourself to do self-care. For many years, I was doing self-care, but there was no self-love. And then there's been times more recently where I'm loving myself. I love me some me. I feel like Tony Braxton. I love me some him, but I'm like, I love me some me. But I wasn't doing self-care. I was doing self-work, which is completely other thing. And so what are the differences between self-love and like how are they different? Because they do intertwine, they can work together. The way I like to think about it is like self-care and self-love can be like Destiny's Child. And we're going back into this whole Beyonce, Virgo month. So it's like self-care and self-love can work together like Destiny's Child. But then self-care and self-love can be like Beyonce or Kelly Rowland or Michelle Williams. It could be a solo act. They don't have to work together, but they also can work well together. So what is the difference? Like, how do self-care and self-love differ? So self-love is the focus on thoughts and feelings, whereas self-care is the focus on actions. Self-care can also allow you to maintain a healthy relationship with yourself, which can foster self-love. So let me break it down this way. Think about it this way. So someone asks you, how are you? How would you answer? You're not going to answer because it's going to be mad odd if you answer, oh, I'm self-care or I'm caring. It's not the same way. It's not the same feeling as I'm loving. Like, oh, how are you? I'm loving me. I'm loving on myself. I'm love. It's not, you don't say, how are you feeling? Or how are you doing? I'm self-care. It doesn't make sense. The same way as, what are you up to? What are you doing? Oh, I'm self-love. It doesn't make sense. I'm doing self-care. I'm doing self-care. I'm not doing self-love. I'm doing self-care. So I don't know if that helps kind of break down, the difference between the two. Another way I want to give you guys a couple examples of the differences. Think about healthy eating. Eating healthy can be self-love and it can also be self-care, but it's the intention behind it, it's the motivation behind it that makes a difference. So eating healthy, the motivation behind self-love and eating healthy is that the belief that we deserve to fuel ourselves with things that we need, versus self-care and the motivation behind self-care and eating healthy is the belief that, dude, I can't survive without food. And like without food, I can't keep going. So I need that fuel. So, the motivation behind that is, it's more practical and factual in that aspect. Another example of self-love versus self-care is throwing out a scale. I mean, literally throwing the scale, freaking away, getting rid of it and saying, bye, Felicia. So throwing out a scale from the aspect of self-love. It's loving your body as it is now. It's accepting who you are, where you are, and that it is okay to be exactly how you are and loving what you see in the mirror. From the aspect of self-care, it's maintaining a healthy mindset around your body image and knowing that whatever that scale says, it's not going to help you foster the self-love. So it's an act of maintaining a healthy mindset. I hope that makes sense. I don't know, like self-care means taking care of yourself physically and mentally, while self-love means showing kindness to yourself. And you can show kindness and love to yourself through self-care. And that's why I say that they work together, but they don't have to be together. So how does one foster self-love and foster self-care? So a couple ideas of ways you can foster self-love is to pay attention to how you talk to yourself. I always say, talk to yourself as if you're talking to your 5-year-old daughter. Even if I don't have a 5-year-old daughter, but when I talk to myself, I think about, if I had a 5-year-old daughter, would I want to talk to her this way? Let's think about this. Another way is to embrace your body as it is today. It doesn't mean you can't make moves towards being healthier, but it's embracing yourself as you are. It's not holding on to those clothes from 10 years ago, that one day I'm going to fit into it. Because are you really going to, if you do get to that size, are you really going to want to wear those same clothes? You probably want something different that celebrates who you are as you are that day right now. So it's being in the present, I think. Being self-love is being in the present, being now. Another way to foster self-love is to remind yourself that you are love. Not that you are just loved, but that you are love. I also believe in, for fostering self-care, a couple of different things is saying no. Saying no is a complete sentence. I think the act of saying no is one of the best forms of self-care we can ever do. Another form of self-care is understanding the 7 different types of rest. And if you haven't listened to my podcast on the 7 different types of rest, I highly, highly, highly recommend listening to that podcast and knowing the different types of rest, and then figuring out which one you currently need, and then doing that type of rest. Physical rest is different than social rest. That's different than mental rest, and different than spiritual rest. There's all these different types of rest, and there is a difference. And knowing the difference and can help you go from, I'm trying to rest, I'm doing all these things, and I still feel exhausted. You probably feel exhausted because you're getting the wrong type of rest. So I think one of the best ways to foster self-care is to understand the different types of rest and giving yourself that. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was, another way to foster self-care is listening to your body and your mind and feeding it what it needs. We matter. You matter. And knowing the difference between self-love and the difference between self-care, knowing the misconceptions behind them, and knowing what you need to fulfill your needs and to refuel yourself and to accept and love yourself and know that you are loved will completely impact how you show up, not just for yourself, but how you show up in the world. And doing that has basically made my life one that I enjoy living. I can say at this birthday, I am worthy. I am worthy of everything I desire in life. And I couldn't say that last year because I didn't feel worthy. And I don't think I can say that I fully loved myself last year. I was on the road. I was coming into the train. I've been on the train for a while of the self-love and trying to get there. I was on the train. I was getting really close to the destination, but I wasn't there yet. From this birthday to the last birthday, I have discovered self-love and my self-worth and loving and accepting who I am. I have learned to know myself better and accept who I am, listening to myself. In addition to that, on this birthday, from this year to last year, from last year to this year, I am learning the difference between self-care and self-work. And I want to do a whole different podcast on self-care and self-work because there is a difference. I was doing a hell of a lot of self-work and I was not focusing on my self-care, which is why I think that people need to know the difference between that one as well. But let's just start with self-care versus self-love. Again, self-love is more of feeling, and self-care is the maintenance. It's the nourishment of ourselves. And so I hope this makes sense. I want you to thrive. If that's the only birthday gift I get this year, is that one person heard this and it made a shift in how they showed up, that's the best birthday gift I could have ever gotten in my entire life. Now, if 20 million of you all get something, honey, I am above and beyond overjoyed and grateful. But know that you are loved and you are worthy. You're worthy of self-love. You're worthy of self-care. They are not the same. They can work together. They can work separately. And both are equally important. I love you, and I will see you guys next week. Ciao.